Circa Queer Histories Festival is hosted by One Institute, the oldest active LGBTQ+ organization in the country, in celebration of LGBTQ+ History Month, a first of its kind in the nation. The LA County-wide festival is taking place throughout October and is a platform to spotlight the immense contributions of queer and trans people throughout history. Circa would not be possible without the support of our sponsors, California Arts Council, 3rd District Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, Aries Management, the City of West Hollywood, LA County Arts and Culture, 2nd District Supervisor Holly Mitchell, 5th District Supervisor Kathy Barger, and ABC7. We would also like to thank our hosts here at Founders Metropolitan Church. If you RSVP to this program, we'll email you a brief evaluation. We'd really appreciate if you could fill it out. Also, consider supporting our work by becoming a member at oneinstitute.org. Thank you, and thanks to our programming partners. Enjoy.
This big mic stand here. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're very excited to present this discussion for you, intersecting the HIV/AIDS crisis with music and its influence as activism. What you just heard, as most of you probably know, is Holy Ground with Bob Crocker. Thank you so much, Bob, for being here with us today. And we're super thankful to Circa for giving this opportunity, and to Founders Metropolitan Community Church, especially Pastor Keith here. And 56 years ago, the MCC was founded by Reverend Troy Perry, and this congregation is what it is today because of him, so we want to thank him as well. And this is one of the final programs of the month in Circa, so we're super excited to be part of that too. As I said, that the topic of discussion for us today is to dive into different hymns that were sung during the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis and speak about how this was used as a mode of activism for queer communities in the Metropolitan Community Church. And Jim, I was wondering if you could maybe just start off by speaking a bit about your experience and the role that music played during your time at MCC.
Sure. My name is Jim Matulski, and I'm the pastor of the Congregational Church of the Peninsula in Belmont, California. But I've been an MCC, Metropolitan Community Church minister, for 43 years, and that included 15 years as the pastor of the MCC Church in San Francisco, in the Castro district of San Francisco, from 85 to 2000. So during very intense years of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And someone, knowing that we were going to do this presentation today, made this comment on my Facebook page this morning. And I think one sentence explains the importance of looking at queer history, music, HIV/AIDS, all at one intersection. And this is what a guy named Ron said: "If not for the fellowship and healing from the music, so many of us wouldn't have survived." And then a young woman named Jen, who grew up in the church when I was the pastor, who always sat in the balcony with her family, said, "Truth." And I liked that little exchange between them on the Facebook page because it captured in a way that even all of our academic discourse and our storytelling doesn't quite get at. Music was how we got through. And you can look at this from a political perspective or a sociological perspective. All these things are important from an epidemiological perspective, but the simple line is music got us through. And what we want to recreate here for us in this hour together is just an experience of that with some commentary about the meaning of it. But we want to bring you back to that place and hopefully inspire you for the future by going back to that place. The MCC church in San Francisco was a church of about 500 members in the Castro district. We had a close sibling relationship with this church, which at that time was called Metropolitan Community Church of Los Angeles. As Thomas mentioned, it's the founding church of the MCC. And the MCC was one of the largest grassroots LGBT organizations in the world at the time of its peak membership, and continues still as self-determined queer spiritual spaces. In the 80s, we had gone through a period of 20 years of sort of proving that it was okay to be gay and Christian. That may sound naive or simple today, but I remind us that most people who gather in spiritual spaces in the United States today, for example, worshiped in congregations that do not affirm LGBTQ people. So just that one question, is it okay to be gay and Christian, was important to us in a way that's maybe a little hard to understand. And then AIDS hit. AIDS, a disease that would eventually affect 70 million people, 35 million of whom are no longer alive. And it was a terminal disease at the time of its acknowledgement by the Center for Disease Control in the early 1980s. It became something we learned to live with, even as many of us were dying from it. So the music was what got us through that. The little church in the Castro district in San Francisco was in a zip code that was the most AIDS affected of any zip code in the United States at the time for its size. So it was very intense. 20,000 people died of AIDS in San Francisco during this period, many of whom were in that one little zip code in the Castro district. So the self-determined queer spiritual space became an important source of support. And music is, as I said, what held us together. We didn't believe the same things religiously half the time. Politically, it was a mixed gay men and lesbian space, which was a little countercultural at the time, and still significant, I think. And the fact that it was there day in, day out, like this church here in Los Angeles, it meant more than just church. It really meant home for many people, including those who were dying. In the 1980s, the trajectory between diagnosis and death for people with HIV was 11 months. It didn't become 19 months until the end of the 80s with the introduction and more widespread use of AZT, a particular drug, and it did not become what medical people now call manageable chronic disease, but which people are still dying from, until the mid-1990s. So we're taking you back to that period, and just this one song, Holy Ground, then I'll stop, is an example that we sang at the beginning. An evangelical Christian hymn written in the early 1980s became a very popular song at our gatherings. And there are a few ways in which we queered it or changed it for our own use. First of all, just using evangelical Christian music in a queer context was in itself a little ahead of its time, shall we say. And the fact that it displeased the evangelical composers who wrote it was just an extra bonus for us. We changed the words of our hymns to address the awareness of gender. This was originally, we are standing on holy ground, and I know there are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in your presence on holy ground. We changed the third person, he, him, to refer to Jesus, to God, to deity, or even to humanity, to a you, a second person, a direct address, because we didn't believe that male gendered language for God was appropriate. And that came out of our queer experience. And then just the subject matter of this song, just to round it out, we're standing on holy ground. Queer people standing in their own church, calling it holy ground, when most people in the dominant culture, and particularly in the religious culture, found that a blasphemous notion. I know that there are angels all around. In an AIDS context, it could mean celestial beings, but it acknowledges our intense awareness of all the people that had died, who we felt were still present to us, though not in the body, but still present. And so we called them angels. Let us praise Jesus now. We're standing on holy ground, standing in your presence, claiming our place in spirituality and claiming our place in the church as openly self-loving, self-affirming LGBT people.
But Jim, you have to tell the folks how you made the language inclusive in the hymnal.
So this is where our queer identity or our gay identities and our feminist identities, because feminism was as important to us as all of our liberation-oriented political beliefs, caused us to change. I didn't bring one. I have one though. It's this thick 600-page hymn book, and this was the first religious group to do this, where all the male pronouns were taken out, and either turned to second person, you, your, or in a few instances to female pronouns to balance it. I mean, you won't find a church in the country that uses she for God or even goddess, but it was the queer people who did that, and we did it ahead of the curve. And how we did it in the pre-computer age, I would take a hymn, praise God from whom all blessings flow, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, right? Then I would go to a copy store that had a Kodak machine, because they were the Cadillac of copiers, and make a Xerox or a Kodak of the original from, say, the Episcopalian hymnal. And we got copyright permissions to do this. We were kind of outlaws in every other way, but we did observe copyright. And then we would find matching typeface in the same hymn book for the words we wanted to replace. And we'd take an X-Acto knife and cut out the old word and then replace it with the new word cut out. And then we would tape over it with a particular kind of 3M tape that was transparent, take it back to the copy store, and then create a clean copy of these reworded hymns. And we did it with 600 of them. So we were a little obsessive, but sometimes that's what gets you through too. So is that a good example?
I remember contacting Jim for the first time, and I contacted him out of the blue, and he was like, do you want to talk the next day? So we set up a phone call and talked, and when you told me that story, I remember just thinking, well, this is the coolest person ever to be doing something like this. It was pretty remarkable. The next song that we're going to be playing for you, I play saxophone, by the way, if you haven't noticed here, is the When We All Get to Heaven hymn. And so this hymn was particularly significant because it explored a lot of themes of life and death, especially during the AIDS crisis, which were many of the themes in the congregation, since a large portion of that congregation was suffering from HIV or AIDS. Whether people were suffering or not from AIDS, or their loved ones were ill, or there was some internalized perception about what it meant to have AIDS, or conflict with sexuality, singing this hymn really helped acknowledge all people who were in the congregation, in the room, and it was an opportunity for people to, like you said, Jim, claim a space that was home, that was felt familiar, but that they may have been ostracized from because of their diagnosis or because of who they were. So let's play When We All Get to Heaven, and please feel free to sing along as well.
Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing of mercy and of grace. In the nations bright and blessed Christ prepares for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, sing and shout victory. We walk the pilgrim pathway, while blue overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow outside. When we all get to heaven, what a day that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Christ in glory will the toils of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day that will be. When we all see Jesus, sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, its beauty will behold. We shall tread the streets of gold when we all get to heaven. What a day of rejoicing. Sing and shout victory. Now, I want to say just a couple things about this song and its significance around HIV, spirituality, activism. And by activism, I mean this simply. What does it mean to motivate you to want to engage your circumstance and overcome and change it? So what about these songs about heaven were motivating us at a time when people were dying all the time? At that time, I was in my 20s, and I was this pastor of a church of people in their 20s. And in a 10-year period, just as an example, and the LA church has a similar kind of demographic, we lost 500 members, mostly in their 20s and 30s. So, and yet, you know, this, what you expect to find in the middle of the Castro district of San Francisco on a Sunday night, every Sunday night, a packed church, often out onto the sidewalks or into the alleyway on the side, of gay men, mostly, and a number of lesbians, and their families, as children and adults, packed out singing 19th century revival gospel songs. Now, if you want to know this genre, you're probably familiar in Los Angeles with the Angelus Temple, and its very famous pastor, Amy Sepple McPherson, who was also a pioneer in her ways, in many ways. But that's the kind of music they did there. How does it surface in the 1980s in the Castro district? And how did we render it? So you can look at a hymn on the page, and it won't tell you anything about how it's performed or what the context of it means. And Thomas, our distinguished musicologist, is going to say more about that, the technical aspects of that. But why were we singing revival hymns from the 19th century? Well, this is when the national discourse, the religious and political discourse around people with HIV was this: God caused AIDS to punish people for their homosexuality. And the other people who were affected by it were Haitian immigrants, disproportionately, intravenous drug users, sex workers, and somebody else I'm leaving out. But in Congress, there would be Congress people waving around Bibles that they'd never read, saying this is God's way of purging the population of an undesirable element. And so they would refuse to fund research and care for people with AIDS. And they had this very nasty message. This is God's punishment. And people believed that. And if you don't think it's an insidious and popular kind of prejudice, I will say this, I'm probably not supposed to, but our vice presidential candidate, Vance, has been telling people the very same lies right now that Haitian immigrants in Ohio are bringing AIDS to Ohio. It's not just a pet thing. He's also resurrecting that trope about disease and punishment and illness, and it's simply not true. We know that to be true. And then, so for us to be singing these simple songs about heaven and the love of Jesus, you know, one of the things that I discovered as a pastor is that when people were dying who had been out gay people and proud of who they were, the specter of painful death sometimes would bring back something that was nascent in them, self-hatred, the worry that maybe there was some truth to the terrible religious lies they had been indoctrinated with, which is painful to observe. So we, in community together, we never judged people for their beliefs, but we tried to reinforce the simple message: God loves you, Jesus loves you. And why are modern people singing about heaven? Well, a lot of young people were dying, and we couldn't accept that they were dying in vain or that death had the final word. We believed, and I do believe this, that there was more to us than just our bodies. And so singing about heaven, which may sound peculiar to us, to our 2024 ear, brought a lot of comfort. And finally, this simple phrase: when we all get to heaven. All, not some, all. This is not how Christians typically talk. Unfortunately, people don't say, oh, they're Christian, they're so open-minded. Instead, they associate with it an exclusivism that in some of these older hymns from another era, we found comforting. If there is a heaven, we're all going there, or none of us are going. So it was an act of solidarity to make a phrase like, when we all get to heaven.
And you're clearly pointing out the context, performance practice, and compositional techniques, all that you mentioned just there. So context, where was this performed? How was it performed? Who was it performed for? What were we trying to say? But then also specific elements of the lyrics, right? So how what we say actually takes a next level of significance. And it takes that significance through the actual music, right? The words that we're talking about in the hymn, if you notice, a lot of times when we're talking about things that are of hope or are of looking forward, there are ascending lines, so we're going up in pitch, and this is common in lots of different types of hymns, but particularly the hymns that we're singing today help paint a picture of what the narrative is through the phrasing of the music. Also, what we look at is ornamentation in the music to sort of signal what we'll call a queering of the performance practice. So what I mean by ornamentation is that each time that you're singing a verse or a chorus, you do it a little bit differently, right? So particularly like with instrumentation, if I play the first line of what we just did,
I would say the degree of ornamentation in a gay church is higher than it is, say, in a Baptist church.
Yes, and when we all get to heaven, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim, but this was also a song that was sung a lot at funerals for AIDS deaths, and particularly functioned in a way where the congregation could sing and then a soloist could sing in response. And the soloist, by singing in response, is actually commemorating or paying tribute to somebody that died. And it wasn't just for when we all get to heaven, but elegies are in the hymnals, whole section of songs that were sung at funerals too, to commemorate those that have passed. Another popular elegy that was sung was O Devil Time. Do you want to speak a little bit about O Devil Time, Jim?
Sure. Old Devil Time is a song composed by Pete Seeger, and is generally sung secularly. Old Devil Time, I'm gonna fool you now. Old Devil Time, you'd like to bring me down. When I feel low, my lovers gather around and help me rise to fight you one more time. And so using the word devil, reclaiming it, not as a negative thing, just sort of or not in a satanic way, but just like acknowledging that it's a multivalent word. Old devil time. I'm gonna fool you now. It's an assertion. You know, you do not have the last word here. You'd like to bring me down. When we talk about old devil time, we could just as well be singing to politicians, to unsympathetic family members, to church leaders. You think you can beat us, you cannot. When I feel low, my lovers gather around and help me rise to fight you one more time. The use of the word lovers. So this is a secular song. I guarantee you only queer people would ever sing it in church. And to use the word lovers, just let me pick that word out for a second. Before there was gay marriage or same-sex marriage, and before it was legal, groups like the Metropolitan Community Churches were performing commitment ceremonies. Sometimes they were actually illegal, sometimes they had no legal standing, depending on where you were. But we never thought that marriage would become legal. We didn't use words like husband and wife. The word that we used, we didn't even use partners. This is pre-partners. Now, I know I'm not the only person in the room who remembers this. We used the word lovers. And the word was like, who are you lovers with? Or talking about others. We would never do that. Well, I heard that she was lovers with her before she was lovers with her. So, you know, the word lover, which is also, it's so romantic and so beautiful, right? That's the
and
word.
Transgressive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the word that we used to characterize our relationship. Lovers. We were an army of lovers. So we were singing about how our lovers gathered around us when we were sick. So I did lots of funerals. I was with lots of people who died. What their straight friends and family members who showed up, and there were many, I want to acknowledge that with gratitude, would say to me time and time again, you know, I could never imagine in our family an ex-wife and an ex-husband being for each other in this, for each other in such an intimate way. Now I realize this is a stereotype, but they talked about it as a difference between queer community and straight community. That lovers, ex-lovers, former lovers, would be the ones who would form a family network. Was a remarkable thing. So we sacralized the word lovers in this way. And then finally, we improvised a verse. Paul Francis was a person with AIDS at the San Francisco church who wrote this word, and we used it. It was popularized by a cabaret singer from New York, Randa McNamara is her name. And she used to sing in all the cabarets in New York, Marie's Crisis and places like that. So she popularized the song for us, but with this additional verse that Pete Seeger did not write. Old devil AIDS, you thought you'd keep us down, but you were wrong. We're still going strong. When we feel sick, our lovers gather round and help us rise to fight you one more time. So we were using the word AIDS in our worship services, not in a negative way. Well, it is negative, but We said the word. You know, this is back when people didn't even want to say the word out loud. We incorporated it and came up with AIDS as an enculturated word or an indigenized word, equating, putting it right out there. We weren't ashamed of it. We weren't afraid of it. We engaged it head on, and that inspired activism.
We're just going to take a second and actually listen to O Devil Time. Raina's going to pull up the recording for us now, and this recording is from 1987. I'm sorry?
I think MCC San Francisco.
That's right, yeah.
I have to hear a second of it, but I'm pretty sure.
The way I learned it was Tim Stephan was very much the driving force between the founding of the AIDS ministry at MCC New York. And he really ran until he died, which was last winter. And Tim wrote his memorial service, and he put this song in the service. So it's really a believable song. And when I was here in July, John Lennihan played the piano, and since then, John is wherever Tim is. So I sang at John's memorial service, and so it just seems that Tim really started something somehow.
No Storm, No Storm, when she sang it in that recording, was a cappella. Typically it's with music. This was another way to, use of performance practice to claim the space, and also it involved a lot of intentionality on the performer's part. Intentionality is another aspect that we're going to be talking about in Abide by Me, which we'll sing now. In Abide by Me, oftentimes in MCC, the verses were sung in different instrumentations. So the first verse, organ, second verse, band, third verse, piano, then unaccompanied. What this did require from everyone was this kind of participation that made the music a lot more lively, and intentionality on their part too, which engaged everybody, involved everybody, and didn't necessarily mean that you had to have as much musical experience as you had with other songs. So we'll sing Abide by Me, and yes, feel free to sing along, please.
God with me abide, when other helpers fail and comforts flee. Help of the helpless abide with me. Swift to its close, So this hymn harkens back to an even earlier time than the 19th century revival songs that we mentioned that were popular in these services. This is a Victorian hymn, mid 19th century, and its ways of talking about death are very sentimental and anachronistic. But when you're in the context of a lot of people dying, to actually say the words, to talk about it, is very powerful. And you might think, what connects Victorian England and the Castro district of San Francisco 140 years later? The proximity to death. And that meant we weren't afraid to use the words. This is what the author of this text in the mid-19th century, this is what the story of it. The summer was passing away, and the month of September, in which he was once more to quit his native land, meaning die, arrived, and each day seemed to have a special value as being one day nearer his departure. His family were surprised and almost alarmed at his announcing his intention of preaching one more time to his people. His weakness and the possible danger attending the effort were urged to prevent it, but in vain. It was better, as he once often said playfully, it was better when he was in good health to wear out than to rust out. He felt that he should be enabled to fulfill his wish and feared not for the result. His expectation was well-founded. He did preach, and amid his breathless attention of his hearers, gave them the sermon on the Holy Communion, which he inserted last in this volume. He afterwards assisted at the administration of the Holy Eucharist, and though necessarily much exhausted by the exertion and excitement of this effort, yet his friends had no reason to believe it had been hurtful to him. In the evening of the same day, he placed the hands of his hymn in their hands just before he died. Now, this is a very Victorian sentimental anecdote about the origin of the text, and yet there was such a strong resonance to what it was like to go to a gay church or a queer church in the 80s, in particular the late 80s and well into the 90s, where we saw people who were physically ill in church. We did not shut away from public view the people who were sick or dying. You could go to an MCC church anywhere at that time and see people with IV poles, with bags attached to them as they were receiving medication during the church service, or even hydration. You could hear the sound of AZT alarms going off all the way through the service. Remember that when people first started taking AZT, the first widely available drug, you had to take it every 4 hours, or so you were told, and it was timed. They said if you take it a minute late, you're going to mutate. And so it sounds silly now, but that meant if you were in a gay gathering, you heard buzzers going off all the time to remind you to take your AZT medication. The language of this is a hymn that appears mostly in hymn books and is sung when it's sung in the evening. And even this hymn book calls it an evening hymn. But that's just the metaphor. Every darn verse hits what it means to be at the eve of your life, the very ending. And it was very comforting to have people who were in church, who were ill, with us there. We were all there together. People who would announce that on Sunday night in church, this Wednesday, I intend to end my own life in the presence of my friends and family and loved ones because I don't want to live with this disease anymore. That's not suicide. That's community support for self-determination. What's happening at a time when there was no medical intervention that made a difference for people's lives. So, this description, point me to the skies, I need thy presence every passing hour, change and decay, and all around I see, O thou who changest not, abide with me. Here it is, be present still before my closing eyes, shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. And then these last words, ills have no weight and tears no bitterness. Where is death's sting? Where, grave, thy victory? I triumph still if thou abide with me. And the thou was not just God, but it was the people, the community surrounding people who were close to death. They were not alone. They were not sequestered. In fact, we brought them into community during this period. So this hymn became again, who can believe this, that this would be what we were singing, choosing to sing. But there we were, and we didn't just sing it like a Victorian hymn in an English church in the mid-19th century. We had, as Thomas pointed out, a band. We had organ, we had piano, we had bass guitars, we had drums. And then also the unaccompanied voice was really important. that final, before the last verse, all instruments drop out. And all you hear are human voices in harmony. I believe that music was a healing presence as much as any drug that the FDA wouldn't give us access to. We didn't have access to drugs like that, but we could make music together, and even the harmonies were healing.
You just mentioned unaccompanied music, and it segues well into our next topic of protest music and how MCC engaged in protest music during the AIDS crisis, but also how they recontextualized the song that originally had a protest meaning, Singing for Our Lives by Holly Near. November 27th, 1978, that was the assassination of Harvey Milk and George Moscone, and it was at the vigil that evening that Holly Near composed Singing for Our Lives in a car on the way to the vigil on a piece of paper, and had it in her back pocket, and then took it out at the vigil. And this is a pedagogical approach to music, in that she taught everybody how to sing the song in the 45 minutes to an hour that they had before. The San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus was there, the Lesbian Gay Freedom Band, their name at the time was also there, along with the, I think at the time it was called the Queer Chorus of San Francisco. And this was one of the first examples, well, it was first of many examples of queer activism in the Castro, but when it came to the AIDS crisis, for folks in the Castro, a predominantly white neighborhood, understanding how AIDS impacted Black communities was really an exercise in liberation that they needed to take on in order to know. Wow. In order to really know the impact of AIDS across their entire community, and not just the one that it was affected in the Castro. And so gospel music actually really served as a way to bridge this gap and to help folks in the Castro understand how it was disproportionately affecting Black communities in San Francisco as well. Singing for Our Lives, they would do different renditions of the song, but most notably in MCC, a gospel rendition. And we'll sing that for you today. I think that will be, it looks like our last song that we'll be singing together today. So please feel free to sing along with us.
We are songs not only in church, but as Thomas mentioned, at political rallies or in marches all the way down Market Street in San Francisco, or at the National March for Lesbian and Gay Rights in Washington, D.C., which there were several. You could improvise and add verses, and we did, and we never tired of it.
We just want to thank you all so much for being here today. We realize that it's almost that time, so we want to leave some time for questions as well, if anybody has any for us, for Jim, for Bob as well.
Are you planning to galvanize this information and these stories and songs to visibility giving? Of putting this in some media form, like a book or a pamphlet or a documentary or something that can further venture into the specific dynamics and experience of this particular segment in time that had such a profound effect and in many ways continues to in ways that most people are not aware of?
All of the above.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
I think what we're after here is trying to make whatever the next step is as accessible and reach as many people as we can as possible, because this is something that is still relevant today, that people need to be aware of and know why music activism in AIDS communities in MCC is important. We want to continue doing presentations together, but also I can see a series of performances, lecture performances, like these being something that we continue to do in the future.
I can share two items that have occurred already, which is that the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada did a presentation on music in MCC a couple of years ago, which was published in the journal The Hymn. And in addition to that, sorry, I have laryngitis. Lynn Abrams, a wonderful researcher, is doing an ethnographic study of our church that includes a lot of information about the music.
Yeah, so the material that Bob just referenced, the historian is Lynn Gerber, and she discovered, along with some others, that all of the worship services of MCC San Francisco were recorded as audio tapes during the 80s and 90s, but no one knew it. And then they were put away in a box and sealed under the stage, and then when they were vacating the building, which was sold and it's now condominiums, they found this box of audio tapes. And they've gotten grants from California Humanities and some other sources to digitize them. They're all digitized now and available, and will be a podcast later this year. So this is a rich vein of material. Thomas is really pioneering in bringing musicological analysis to this period, and I know that we're going to see more from him in the years to come. And we might, if we have time again, maybe we can sing one more. Yeah.
I just want to thank you all for coming to this event, and I think it's incredible. You know, I'm a music person, singer. I play sax. I haven't played sax in a while. I don't own one yet. I'm trying to get another one. But I just think that these kinds of events, gatherings, are very important. But I also want to point out the interconnectedness. You mentioned Amy McPherson, the Foursquare Church. Right. And I was a member of them before I came to Founders. Wow. And just the interconnectedness. I mean, I graduated from Life Pacific University. So it's, you know, and I came to Founders, and I was able to find myself and my identity and my sexual identity. So I think through music, like you say, music does heal. If there's anything that heals me more than anything in my spiritual walk, it's music. It's worship, it's praise. Something changes in me when I worship. Something changes in me when I praise. And the music, and we have a beautiful pastor who also plays piano, and who's has done some music. And so, but I wanted to talk about the interconnectedness and point that out in what you discussed. And I just want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you for having this presentation. It means a lot to me personally. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Church Alive.
I just wanted to say that there was the music of the church, but there was also the music of the disco
Yeah.
that was integrated into the church and vice versa. So I would hopefully recommend that it is an integral part of the YouTube that you put out for all of us.
Yeah, we would be remiss in not mentioning it, several names, but we'll just pick one. Sylvester, who was originally a church singer, right? Whose music, bridged church and disco, Take Me to Heaven. There's so many I can't even. Who also died of AIDS and was a member of the City of Refuge Church, an African American, Pentecostal, same gender-loving congregation that's now a member of the United Church of Christ that had a close relationship with has a close relationship with MCC. Sylvester's origins as a disco singer are well known. I don't know that his church background is as much acknowledged. And that's just one example, but I think a good one for what you're drawing attention to.
And his experience with the Cockettes too, and the performance group there. Yeah, and a lot of the same kind of activism mobilizing that the Cockettes did. See that similarly in the church. I think they have.
I'll echo everybody else to say thank you for this. I think it's important, and I know Jim will back me up on this, that for many of us, it was MCC, it was the AIDS pandemic that brought us to MCC. Either we were sick or our loved ones had died. And for those of us who've been raised in the church and who had left it, the music at first terrified us because it was everything we had left behind, and we had to find ways to reclaim it. And so it was significant in that way that we could do this in a way that was honest for us.
It reminds me of the way that I hear folks using the term queer now in a way that is a reclaiming of the word, as it was pejorative for so many years, and now sort of a word that feels as inclusive as it can be to the majority of the LGBTQ+ community.
Well, and the queer church also brought together people of different religious backgrounds, and we benefited from the cross-pollination, the cross-exposure. I grew up in a Polish Catholic church in Detroit. There were no tambourines there. We did not sing in English. In fact, my first hymn I remember, Tantum ergo sacramentum. That wasn't helpful to me during AIDS. But the gospel music especially, which I found alternately distasteful and terrifying, but so emotional and so cathartic, gave me a way to express through my body and through music something that I wouldn't have had just from my Catholic background, which I appreciate aspects of it too. But the miracle of the queer church was it brought people together, not around doctrine or belief, but around experience.
So my background is I come from the Episcopal Church with a small c, right? And as a young trans individual who left the church at a very formative age, I would say, because I did not see queer history being part of that story, and that this has been extremely healing for my inner child who felt abandoned by their church. And knowing that the church can be such a refuge, and trying to explain that. So this has been very healing, and I'm so happy to bear witness to these oral histories and to be in community with everyone here.
Thank you. On that note, we will end with When We All Get to Heaven. Or, I'm sorry, We Are the Church Alive. We already sang When We All Get to Heaven.
And a quick background on this. The authors, Jack Hoggett and David Pelletier, are MCC ministers. I don't know what happened to David, but Jack died a few years back, and he had a drag performance named Jack St. John. And he used to play a lot of the piano on these evening services that we referenced. And though they wrote these words before AIDS, we are the church alive, Christ's presence on this earth, particularly this verse, we are the church alive, the body must be healed. Where strife has bruised and battered us, God's wholeness is revealed. Our mission is an urgent one. In strength and health, let's stand, so that our vision to God's light will shine across the land. Those pre-AIDS gay liberation words became very powerful during AIDS, and this became our AIDS anthem. So much so that the National Council of Churches came to San Francisco in 1989 to study AIDS, and 1989, 8 years late, and they ended up including this hymn in a book that they wrote about their experiences. And the affirmation that I think I want to leave us with is, it was so important for us to assert what we knew to be true. We are not dying. We are changing, but we are not dying, and we are not defeated. We are a church and a people alive. And that assertion kept us going. So let's just sing, we could just sing a couple of verses of it, maybe verses 1 and 3. Or actually we should say guilt and shame too. So let's do 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. I hate cutting verses. I'm that minister that makes you sing all the verses.
We're going to be in heaven quite a long time, so you may as well get used to singing all the verses now, has always been my theory.
As Bob did for many years at the churches where I was the pastor and he was the music director, the organ bench has overruled the minister. So let's just sing all the verses. And if you want to stand, let's stand to do that. And you can sit too. Crocker, who's the music man, who valiantly sang even with laryngitis. Thank you. Thank you to Pastor Keith and Founders MCC, and Raina and the staff here for hosting this. And thank you, Circa. Thank you, Circa One Institute, for recognizing some value in this topic of religion, queerness, spirituality, music. Thank you, thank you. All right.